Hi everyone, this is Professor Benjamin, and we have finished week 2 of this course. We are not fully complete week 2 of this course. Don't forget that you have your Ethics, Economics, and Policy quiz due by Sunday, 11:59. So make sure by the 23rd, 11:59, you have your Ethics, Economics, and Policy quiz due. Okay? A couple of little housekeeping items. Number 1. A lot of you are struggling with the initial post and response post deadlines and requirements. I just want to be clear that initial posts in this class are due by Tuesday, response posts are due by Thursday. Initial posts need at least 300 words. They need to contain proper sourcing. They need to have paragraphs. They need to have a clear introduction, body, and conclusion, and you need to read the material in the module. So here's the issue. A lot of students are just living day by day, so they're not planning ahead. And the issue is you log in, you just kind of quickly read the question and then quickly look for the answer in the materials given. And unfortunately in this class, the forum posts are not set up in that way. The forums are set up like mini papers where you actually have to read the materials, all of the materials under the module, analyze the materials, and then write a thoughtful response. So if you're logging in on Tuesday night at 10 o'clock to make your post, most likely your post is not going to meet the requirements for this course. So it's absolutely essential that you spend more time on this class. I know a lot of you might be in a routine already and this class was added to keep your financial aid, but you need to make sure you're meeting the requirements for the course. I have expectations and I'm hoping that my students meet my expectations for the course. Remember, this is meeting a non-lab science requirement, so I have high expectations for this class and for my students. A couple other things. Remember, we're covering 2 sessions per week, so you should be making 2 initial posts and 2 response posts. This week is we will be covering consumption and sustainability. I also want to show you a look ahead because the following week we have off for spring break, but you will also need to start acquiring the film Fed Up because in week 6 you will have Fed Up required to watch. So maybe over spring break it would be a good idea for you to watch Fed Up. Okay, so that would be something that I would suggest. Okay, so this week we're going to have session 4 and session 5. Session 4 deals with consumption and waste, and session 4 deals with consumption and waste and ties with chapter 17 of the textbook. Chapter 5 deals with sustainability. So a couple important things that you want to think about for this week is number 1 is we consume way too many products. Just think about all the single-use plastic we use on an everyday basis, how much you throw away. We live in a throwaway society. And the reason for that is that's really how our economy is set up, is that it's a consumption economy. So what we do is it's all about consumption. So, you know, a lot of the clothes we buy are fast fashion. A great film for that is The True Cost. That's a great film that talks about the fast fashion industry and how we buy things that are made to break. This is a required short 20-minute film that you're required to watch on planned obsolescence, perceived obsolescence, and externalization of costs. You also will be asked to read this article, Consumption by Happiness, Evidence from the United States. It's about $70,000 in which after that amount, where your basic needs are met, where your mortgage is met, and you have food on the table and you can make a car payment, etc., that after that amount, we see no increase in happiness from individuals. In fact, all we see is a hedonic treadmill, which is you reach a certain amount of money that you make and then you look for more and more and more and more, and you wind up spending more, you wind up using more consumer goods, and this becomes a hedonic cycle, an issue in our consumption patterns. And so this article talks about the 2 things that actually bring happiness to individuals: vehicle consumption and leisure consumption. Leisure consumption because it's the idea of experiences rather than stuff. Just remember, most likely what you remember about something is doing something with somebody rather than actually what they bought you. And so that is something that you want to make sure you take from that module. Also, sustainability talks about the idea that we should buy from more sustainable companies. These are companies that engage in fair trade, engage in people, profit, planet, or economic, social, and environmental standards. They cost more money, but that means that you would buy less, which is the whole idea of of stopping that hedonic treadmill, which is, think about years ago, you would buy a table and you'd save and save and save for that table because it was made from real wood and it was handcrafted and the people were paid the right amount of money along that chain. But today we buy cheap things that break, so they're easily replaceable, and we pay less money for them. But then that contributes to that idea that we are going to run out of landfill space because we use too many goods. Okay, so that just gives you a brief idea of consumption and sustainability. Last week, I want to go back to a couple important things that a lot of students fail to address in their posts. Number one, Hardin talks about privatization in his article, and while he gives recommendations for it, he does say, I really just don't feel comfortable with privatizing commons. Commons are shared spaces, so if we privatize national parks, then we lose the idea that that's a commons or a shared space. Okay? The other issue with privatization is the fact that it's a social justice issue. So if we make people have permits, which is what we're doing in Acadia National Park this summer, is that you have to have reservations in order to attend the park. If we do things like that, or a lottery system, who's going to be able to attend? It's going to be the middle to upper class people who can schedule their vacations around the time they receive the permit. What about people who are working 2 full-time jobs and in the mail comes, well, this is your year to go to Yosemite. And what if you can't afford to go that year? It's a social justice issue if we privatize. Also, the whole idea of Tragedy of the Commons is looking for short-term gains rather than thinking about the long-term interests of society. Well, privatizing things to private companies, they're usually trying to meet a bottom line. So they're going to look for greed rather than looking at the long-term interest. The Gulf oil spill article talks about this. It talks about the fact that BP Oil did not put the correct mechanisms in to stop an oil leak. And the reason they didn't do that was they're trying to meet their bottom line, so they're cutting corners. And that created an enormous environmental disaster that we are still dealing with today. Is that their whole idea is to meet the needs of their stockholders, to drive their revenues. Well, in order to do that, they're going to cut environmental costs. So leasing out oceans to private companies is probably not the best idea. Hardin also talks about welfare state. Now listen, I am totally for welfare state. I think people do need a safety net at points in their lives to help them come back up or rise to the point where they would like to be financially. But Hardin talks about the fact that the welfare state allows individuals to continue to breed. The United Nations clearly states in that document that we cannot infringe upon people's personal freedoms to breed. We can't tell people you can't have kids. We can put policies in place to do that, but we cannot tell people you cannot have kids. So we can put in tax incentives. We can put in the One China child policy, which did not work out. All of those make people feel like their freedoms aren't taken away, but yet they are. And the welfare state, what it's doing is trying to help people, right? But what Hardin's saying is that if we put the welfare state in, it continues to allow people to look for their short-term gains rather than the long-term interests of society. And that's an issue. I mean, it is an issue if you look at it, if people are abusing the system. If they're not abusing the system, then it's not. The other issue is that I want you to really look into mutual corrosion, which is talked about in that article, because on your midterm exam, you're going to see a question about mutual corrosion. And I talked about this in the last the last roundup that I sent out last week. But the problem is a lot of you aren't listening to the roundups because you're just trying to get by. And unfortunately, this class is not set up as a get-by class. It's set up as a scientific class that requires you to read, analyze, critically think. Okay, so please, if you haven't, go back and listen to the roundup that I sent out last week where I talk about mutual corrosion. Overall, okay job. I just think that a lot of you are just not putting the time into the course that you need to, and I know that's difficult. Hopefully, spring break, maybe you can go back and put the time in that this course really needs for you to succeed in the course and really learn and critically think about the material given. I do have hope. I think some of you are putting the time in, some of you aren't, and I hope that after this week, where we have consumption and sustainability coming up, that you're able to go back and put the time into the course that it needs in order to succeed in this class. Okay? If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out. I always make comments on your posts why you didn't receive the points that you wanted to receive. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out. I hope you have a great week, and I look forward to your posts this week.